Hi, welcome back. So, as you saw in the previous episode, I've done a lot of work on the chassis. So I've been making up all the chassis parts, and really I've got the suspension together. And when I put the suspension together, I looked at the wheel spacing and I thought, I got a problem. Something's not right. So the best way to deal with that is mock it up in cardboard. Now this isn't obviously a complete mock-up in cardboard, it's just giving me the rough heights and the shapes against the dimensions that I think it is. And there's clearly a problem. Now, as you can see, I mean this is just a piece of cardboard mocked up. You can see where the problem is straight away, and it was a bit frustrating, and I probably should have seen it when I did the chassis. In fact, I did see it when I did the chassis, and that's what kind of led me to making the cardboard mock-up. And it's this gap here. Now I'll tell you where the problem is. The problem has been because it's a nightmare to try and find the specifications for this thing. So there are loads of, we know the length, we know the width, we know the height. That's generally publicised on the different incarnations of this. So obviously there was let me get this right now, the 152mm SPGH Dana. Then there was the Dana M2, which was a kind of obviously a upgraded version of it. And I suppose the latest incarnation is the Ditta. And actually I do like the shape of the Ditta. I've got a photograph of it somewhere. I think actually there's one there, and it's kind of, can't really see it on the camera, but it's a nice shape. And I'm going to go with that shape over the original Mark 1 Dana. Still going to call it the Dana project because it's easier, because they're all basically in effect. That's where they all kind of came from. But herein lies the problem. I know the length, I know the width, I know the height, but it's very difficult to find the wheelbase. So what I thought is, did a bit more research and obviously found the specifications for the Tatra Truck chassis that it comes from. Downloaded that from the manufacturer's website, and that of course gives me really detailed wheelbase of the Tatra. I think this is the 817 truck, which the SPG Dana is based. Anyway, did all my calculations, took all my measurements, divided it all by 6, and on the whole, I'm spot on. So the distances, for example, from the wheel here to the rear are spot on. Distances between my wheelbase, between my rear 2 wheels are good. My front 2 are good. My front to the front nose is good. My height, I'm playing around with it a little bit, simply because it's slightly wider than the specification for the real one. But in models, they always look better when they're wider. Don't know why, they just do. So obviously there'll be some things added to the top of this. So on the whole, we will be about the right height in terms of the height, of the actual product. But you can see where the problem is, and the problem is here between these 2 wheels. This gap is simply too big. Now, the reason that I was thinking about making that gap a decent size is I was going to put the batteries there. I was going to slide the batteries, make these kind of removable panels, and then slide the batteries underneath. Because, obviously, as you are aware, the main turret goes here, and this turret is going to rotate. So I'm going to have to mount my servo here in the centre. And obviously, I've showed you the servos before. They're quite big. Servo's got to be mounted in the centre with the batteries on either side. So I wanted to have enough space to get the batteries in. But it doesn't quite look right. So my issue now is obviously this is just cardboard, will come off. I will have to cut the chassis and make this gap smaller. And it all started simply because the measurement I took, I didn't include the measurement of the gun. And of course the gun comes right out here somewhere. So it looks about right. Wheels look perfect, looks spot on. The heights are going to look great. So I'm really pleased with that. It's going to be quite heavy, which is going to be, there's a lot more metal in it than I expected. So I'm going to have to think about that. Obviously, things like the internals in there don't have to be metal. In fact, this will be the shell going around. Anyway, I'm not too worried about that. I've got dual 275 watt motors in there, so they are more than capable of pulling any weight I throw at this thing. And even if we go over 100 kilos, those motors will move this around no problem at all. So there we have it. So what I've got to do now is all this is going to come off, and I am going to work out how to cut a perfectly machined chassis in half and get this gap a little bit smaller. I've had lots of cups of tea. I've been sitting back and looking at this thinking, does it work? Does it not work? You know, we're probably only talking about, I don't know. So my batteries, I'm going to need, yeah, we're probably talking about 50 mil, taking 50 mil off this. So I'm starting to strip the chassis down now. So as you can see, we've got all the major bits on the chassis, the risers for the suspension. I've added little suspension coil blocks in. And I'm starting to do some work here. Get my pointer out. I'm starting to do some work on the battery box. So this will sit down here underneath. The batteries will kind of slide in. Everything has just been primed up in etch primer. Here are the little risers for the rear suspension. You see you've got the leaf spring, and then you've got the bracket here, which is mounted, bolted to the leaf spring. And then I have got, let me just grab one. This will sit on there like that, and then underneath that we will have the coils. So the coils just sit then, and the rear's got two. They'll just sit like that. So you've got the leaf and then you've got the coils, and that gives me a really nice sprung base for the motors. That system works really, really well. Don't really need any adjustability on the back. I mean, in a way, the adjustability comes through the fact that I can either run one or two springs. So if I found, for example, that two springs were too hard, then I could just take it down to a single spring, and that's that. All of the steering linkages have all got to be now stripped down. These are all done now. These have all got to be stripped down and painted, and then they can then go back on once they've been painted. There's that front one there, and then the rear one. So the actual chassis, the steering, the drive, mounting, and the wheels are all pretty much done. What I've got to do now is think about this battery tray that sits underneath, and of course the servo mount in the centre, because the servo mounted in the centre is going to move the, let's call it the turret, but you know, that's the bit in the middle with the gun attached to it, which is going to move the turret. Lots to do, but as I said, this one, there's not massive amounts of, there's no deadline for this one. I did solve my problem. You probably can't see really until I've got it all back together, but I actually was a bit concerned about the steering system at the front and how I was going to mount the servo. But again, once I've put the servo in, you'll be able to see that much more clearly. I mean, it's a bit difficult to see like this because it's kind of up on its end. But anyway, that's kind of the chassis so far. What I've got to do now is strip all these down and get these bits painted. So they've had a quick coat of primer now, most of the pieces, and I've reassembled, and I've basically laid it all out on the bench so you can actually see the axles. Yeah, that's what the axles kind of look like. I know they're square, but you know why. That's the tie rod for the steering link at the front. You've got all of these pieces that obviously are the brackets that hold the axles to the leaf springs. Here are the leaf springs, little spring systems there. Steering tie rod and steering linkage, and obviously these are the main hubs. The wheel fits obviously on the axle here, and that fits onto the unit. The rear springs with the brackets to hold, the rear springs with the brackets to hold the motors, and obviously all the springs, the coil springs, which, as I said to you before, they fit kind of underneath like that onto the chassis. So it's funny actually seeing it all kind of laid out here. Obviously there's loads of nuts and bolts as well. And all of that is now going to be put back onto the chassis. Hi, so welcome back to the next part. Now, you obviously saw last time I was playing around with the chassis. I'd stripped all the parts down, I'd painted everything. I've now put all that back together, tested the suspension seems to actually work. It doesn't really move much at the moment, but obviously it's designed to move with all the weight that's going to be on it. I've gone with a slightly different adjustment system, but I'll talk about that later when I come to adjust it. Created a battery tray, welded all that in and painted that. So obviously the batteries are going to be there, slung in the middle, nice and low down. Really, really good. Now, what I would normally do at this stage, apart from taking this off, what I would normally do at this stage is I would build a kind of a space frame for the top section. And I'd build it out of this kind of thin, I don't know what that is, 10mm, 12mm steel box section. But I'm not going to do that this time. The reason I'm not going to do that this time, I had an idea. And the idea was this. These big sheets that I am using, remember these are the shelving units. I've got these folded edges on the shelving units, and it just occurred to me that I could use that as a kind of a structural element in the build. So what I'm actually doing is, you can see I've done it here with this back bit that I've started to make up. What I've done is I've got effectively it's just tack welded together. It's not welded together properly at all yet or finished. All tack welded so I can just see what the shape and the frame is going to be. But basically you can see what I'm doing is I'm using the edges of these frames, and that way I'm going to be able to attach metal to these. So by using the folded section, the whole thing is going to be so much lighter because I'm not using chunky frame underneath. And in theory, it should be incredibly strong. So that is kind of roughly where the rear section is going to go. Obviously, this is all going to be, it's all finished off and top and everything. And then I'm doing the same for the front. And so you can see what I'm doing here with the front. I'm cutting the panels, and I'm cutting them in such a way that I'm using the folded edges. And then the idea is that I will be able to take those folded edges, I've bent that one a little bit, I will be able to then put that in there like that, angle it, and weld it in place, and that will give me the front. As you can see, that's going to be the front. It's hard to kind of visualise it really. The front windows, and then obviously the roof will go across like that. And then that gives me this sort of space here in the middle, which is where the giant sort of gun turret system is going to be. What I will have to do is I'll have to work out where the servo is going to be mounted here, which is going to pivot the turret. I remember this is quite a chunky servo. This is a 24-volt servo, so it's an enormous servo. But yeah, this is working better than I actually expected. It's better than I thought. However, interesting, I thought I had loads of these shelves. I still do. They literally start life out like that. And they then end up looking like that. But I think I've got enough. But metal pieces, I've got to mock all this up. I've already mocked it up in cardboard, if you remember. What I will do is, excuse me, one moment. I will get my cardboard piece. As you can see, here's my cardboard bit. So, if I get rid of this, what I do need to do, urgently, is tidy up this workspace. The cardboard bit kind of sits in there like that, and obviously that goes up. There's my little front bit. But then you can see then what I'm doing is I'm making these pieces up like that. And then in front, I'll have a fascia that comes on it, and then that has these bottom pieces that come in. But that's all just cut with flat, literally with flat metal. But the beauty of this folded stuff, with these folded edges, is that once this is welded in there, I'll have a nice surface to work to drop down across there. So that's going to be really good. I got a bit of a problem here in the middle that I've got to solve. Not exactly sure how I'm going to do it at this moment. because I need to basically follow this lip through. You can see there's a lip here, and I want that lip to go all the way along. But the problem is going to be that this isn't going to be strong enough to mount the big bearing that's going to go on. There's going to be a big bearing that sits in here. Probably, I don't know, I could probably get a 15-inch bearing in there. So I'm going to have to work out how to make all this much, much stronger, so that unfortunately there might need to be more kind of steel reinforcement in here to make that stronger. But on the whole, I'm really happy with this so far. It's really good. It's going to take a lot longer because each of these pieces has to be worked and has to be finished. But it's plenty of time. So that is it for this part, sort of working on the bodywork. I suppose what it does is it highlights the fact that this is literally recycled materials. We still get loads of people that will look at the final product and say, there's no way that is a recycled material. You've just gone out and bought big sheets of metal and just put it together like that. Or, where did you get the parts from? I could put that together myself. But as you can see, these are literally old shelving. I have to finish this one with saying, well, it's just all ADY'S fault.